Hello, innovators. I am Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Fiona, the Millennial Money Woman, and founder of the MillennialWoman.com, personal finance blogger, entrepreneur, innovator, polyglot, and world traveler. Thank you for joining me on the Polymath Polycast.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and this is a show by PolyInnovator, so please say hello to the innovators in the audience.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for listening and for having me.
Hello and welcome to the Polymath Polycast. So we're here to talk about finance, innovation, and personal finance, and Fiona's phenomenal path in life. So the way I like to break the ice is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
Oh, this is a good question. I would say one of the things that not many people know about me is that I'm actually a Formula One fanatic. I love Formula One racing.
Yeah, I did not know that. What got you into it?
You know, it's funny. When I was a little child, I want to say a couple months old, I went to my first ever Formula One Grand Prix with my parents. Obviously, I don't remember it, but it's always been in my blood. And my parents actually met each other at a Formula One race, and they went to, their honeymoon was at a Formula One racetrack. So it's really always been in my family. And I just really have a passion for it, seeing the drivers out there. And I know that there, like so many things in life, you only see the peak of success, but you don't know what's actually underneath that, sacrifice and all of that. And I really love, digging further into drivers' stories. And it's just fascinating to see how they all come out on top in Formula One.
Right, and something that always amazes me is the tires. So since you're racing so hard and for such a quick time, the tires burn out so quickly. So that's why you always have to change it. I'm always thinking about tires on my car and how they're always going to be obviously going to die out over time. But then I'm just thinking about how the whole system is there, where how people think like, okay, now it's time to go into the little spot and get everyone to replace the tires, replace some of the fuel, that kind of thing. It's just an interesting aspect behind it.
That's right. I mean, there's so many things that really go into it. I mean, as I've been obviously a very loyal fan and follower of Formula One, I've, done a lot of research and, so many things go into becoming a champion. I mean, A, you need to make sure you adhere to a good diet. B, you obviously need to have a great exercise routine. I mean, Formula One pilots, they experience more G-forces than astronauts. And, you figure into the complete car configuration, like the wing setup, camber caster, the tire compound. So is it hard? Is it soft? The wind do you get a headwind? Do you get a tailwind?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. Yeah.
Physics aspect. It's
That's
interesting
right.
too because you went down the finance path, but why didn't you go racing?
I should have. Maybe in another life I would have been a racer. But, I think what I would like to do is as I earn more and more money through my blog, essentially, my goal is actually to go racing and, experience some of the thrills that the Formula One racers maybe did in the beginning of their journeys. So race like karting or Formula 3 or whatever it is. So obviously I won't make it to the top pinnacle because I'm already old in
Oh no, you
Formula
still
One
have plenty
racing
of time.
terms. I mean, these guys, I think the youngest racer was 17 years old to go into Formula One. It is unbelievable.
Well, I'm sure that you're still plenty young enough to be going in there too. And I also actually approached PolyInnovator with this idea of phases. And so different phases are different careers that I want to have in life. And I think that you might have another phase down the line where you are a racer. Something like that.
That could be, it's just fascinating to me. And one thing that I think I share with the top Formula One racers is just, the pure dedication to whatever it is that you're doing. In my case, it's the blog and personal finance. I'm truly passionate about it. And I think, as long as you have passion for whatever it is, if you're a marine biologist and you're passionate about that, chances are you'll be really successful. And I think the same goes for my case, the blog or Formula One racers, right? I mean, the top guys, they work day and night, and they have since they were little kids, and that's why they are where they are now.
That dedication and grit. And I was actually reading your blog, and one of them was talking about doing something you enjoy that you could also make money off of. And that's actually half of the Venn diagram for Ikigai. Are you familiar with that concept?
I am actually, yes.
Yeah.
I am not completely like dead on, but I have heard of it before, and I think it's a fascinating concept, and everyone should really find their why or their ikigai. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason for being. And just for people listening in who don't know, it's the balance between what you can get paid for, what you enjoy, what can you do well, and what does the world need. And when you find that culmination of all four, that's what I was saying. Her blog post talked about two of them, but it was very specific, and you were helping people get to those two things, which is cool.
That's right. It's really finding that meaningful direction in your life and finding that purpose. And once you find that, I think not only will you be successful, but you actually have a reason for living, a reason for doing what you're doing, and you're making yourself better, and you're probably making other people's lives better too.
Right. And so, what was your mindset 5 years ago, and how have you changed since then?
Oh, that's a great question. I think one of the major things that changed in my mindset was 5 years ago, I grew up, obviously, in the school system, right? And from a young age, at least in America, we are typically taught to never really judge the teacher, and whatever the teacher or professors in college say, it's basically the word, right, in the class, and whatever they say is right. And I think I kind of brought that mindset into the real world, into the working world too. Like whatever, the leader, the CEO, the boss of whatever company that I'm in says, that goes. But as I started growing and evolving and really dabbling in different areas in my life, I learned that no, sometimes, even the boss or CEO, what they say is not always right. Or the CEO or boss might actually not be sure themselves. So I learned to question some of the things that the leaders say and see if maybe I can come up with a better solution. Because before I always thought, whatever the leaders say is the way it is, period, and no one can be better than them. But now I think my mindset has changed to knowing that, yes, there is a better way, and whatever they say is not always the end-all, be-all. So I've really learned to question things and to try to find better ways, because in the end, there's always a better solution.
It's interesting because I've had a similar experience where I actually got in trouble a lot with my first employer because I've always been a systems thinker. And so as a lifeguard, which was my first job, we were obviously focusing on the pool quite a lot. And so I would see things more often than most because of the systems that I would see, like, okay, this person is bound to do this action, so which means they're probably going to get hurt. Well, if I can talk to them or circumvent that action, it'll prevent them from getting hurt. And so there were certain aspects behind the systems that I would see, and they would start getting bigger and bigger, especially as I became like a manager or instructor or something like that. And at one point, some of the actions I would take, as harmless as they are, I would get in trouble for because they wouldn't be as like aligned with some of the rules or something like that. But I would do them for the sake of the building and for the sake of like doing everything efficiently in the work environment. And so it's just interesting how challenging authority is kind of built in for both of us.
That's exactly right. And I think a lot of people out there, they maybe don't realize that, sometimes authority isn't always right. And chances are most of the time they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just a matter of really pushing the boundaries. But, if people don't push the boundaries, how are things going to be innovated, right? Or how are we able to create new mindsets or processes?
Going off that point one more time, actually, too, I saw TikTok the other day where they're talking about college kids, like their freshman year, and there was this teacher who was literally incorrect about something that they were talking about, and one of the students raised their hand, called them out on it very politely, but was saying like, "Hey, no, it's this way," and the professor was like, "No, I am right. You're the students. Once you get a PhD and make some papers on it, then I'll listen to you." And it was funny because this was literally the day after they had that whole like freshman college assembly where they were saying, "Hey, challenge your teachers." And this is about debate. These are the time of years where you're supposed to challenge thoughts and do new things and stuff like that. And the teacher was just so closed-minded, closed off to it.
Yeah, and I think that happens very often in college too, where the teachers, because of, their tenure or the number of years they spent studying in college, they think that whatever they say is invincible, period. And I'm generalizing. I'm sure there are teachers out there that are, receptive to students' opinions, but unfortunately, that's not always the case. And props to the student for raising their hand and
Right.
really calling out the teacher. I mean, that's courage, but also it means that they're, their mindset is a little different. They're not always following the status quo. They're not following the masses. So that's
Right.
great.
So, starting actual questions now, starting strong. As a certified financial planner, what are sort of the things that you do to help people with their finances?
Yeah, sure. A lot of times being a certified financial planner, I think it's part, obviously, education. So you do have to know your stuff. But on the other hand, I think it's also really an art. So financial planning is really an art more so than a science, because you're trying to compile and combine so many different
Yeah.
complex financial topics that suit specifically that person. Because, let's face it, personal financial planning is personal. So every situation has to be customized and unique. So to answer your question, CFPs, Certified Financial Planners, they really have a deep knowledge in several areas. So one would be estate planning. That means setting up trusts, asset titling, charitable gift vehicles, etc. So how do we actually transfer assets, A, in a tax effective manner, and B, when you die, right? How are we going to ensure that your assets actually go to your designated beneficiaries? So that's estate planning. Then we also are very familiar with tax planning. So CFPs are not CPAs, which are certified public accountants. So we're not, we don't have that title unless you have both credentials, but I don't. But tax planning, we do really focus on because, we want to diversify the different tax vehicles that our clients have, right? You don't want to all be in a pre-tax vehicle, like all have your money stashed in an IRA, that's pre-tax. We want to make sure you're diversified in tax deferred, pre-tax, or taxable vehicles. So it's a lower risk for you having to pay out of pocket for taxes. Then we focus also on investment management. Some CFPs are chartered financial analysts, a CFA, which is basically the pinnacle that you can reach for investment management. They're very, very knowledgeable about investing strategies, etc. CFPs, they do have a deep knowledge, but not as deep as CFAs. And then CFPs also talk about risk management. So how can we mitigate a client's exposure to certain liabilities? That includes life insurance, health insurance, long-term care insurance, umbrella liability insurance. So if someone sues you for $10 million, how can we lower that risk that you actually have to pay $10 million out of pocket? We also focus on retirement planning. So how can we actually get you to your retirement goals? How much money do you have to save now until age 60, if that's when you want to retire, or age 65? And then lastly, we really focus on preparing heirs. So, how do we make sure that we prepare your kids to inherit your wealth? Because I think there's a staggering statistic that I want to say like 90% of all wealth that is passed down through the generations will be lost in the third or second generation that it is passed down. And that's because a lot of heirs, a lot of kids or grandkids, they don't know how to handle the wealth. They don't know what to do with that money. And then they spend it all, or, they gamble or whatever it is. But the point is they lose that family money. So our goal is to also hold family conversations with, the kids and the grandkids to open up that dialogue and share what the parents possibly might want that money to help them with, if it's education planning, if it's whatever it is. But hopefully the point is to ensure that that money is not lost throughout the generations.
Detailed answer there. I loved it. And it's interesting too because it seems like you have to take a polymathic approach. It's almost like a general practitioner in the medical field where you have to know a lot of holistic things in order to see the bigger picture for a client.
That's exactly right. I mean, like you said, in order to really deeply and truly understand the client's situation, we go through multiple meetings, hours and hours of looking through the client's financial documents, B, also interviewing the client. So really getting to know their financial situation. I mean, in some cases, we call it getting financially naked, right?
Yeah.
Like the client literally, they don't really know us, and they probably don't even share their finances as much with their partner or close friends or family. But with this certified financial planner, they really have to get real and honest with
Like a
their
doctor.
exactly like with their relationship with money, right? Or their perspective of money and how they handle, stress as it relates to money. So it's, like I said, it's more of an art than a science.
Yeah.
And most of the times we actually find that, we do some marriage counseling too, because, like one couple, I remember this couple I was helping, the wife, she was like, I really want to do a kitchen renovation with my inheritance. And the husband was like, what? You never told me that. We're not doing a $40,000 kitchen renovation. And then they started going back and forth, and it's our job to bring them back to, the present and focus on their financial goals. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of people skills as well.
Well, and it's interesting too because you mentioned how millennials might be well, not just the millennials, but grandchildren and children inheriting money. I was noticing recently there's a lot of studies how a lot of the wealth is held by the boomer generation. Well, they're starting to, I guess you could say, expire, which is a harsh way of saying it, but they're going to pass on their wealth to their inheritance descendants. And so it's interesting how the wealth is going to change hands in the next coming decade or so. And like you said, a lot of people don't know how to manage their money.
That's right. I actually have this fascinating story. This couple, they came from Eastern Europe, had no money whatsoever, went to America, and they worked day and night, unbelievable work ethic, and they built this amazing international transportation empire, if you will. And they're worth tens and tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. They built this husband and wife together, and it was unbelievable to hear their journey. And then they have a couple of kids, and I understand it from their perspective. They want to pass along their wealth to their kids and give everything that they didn't have growing up to their kids, which I understand. But to some degree, I think the kids, they really don't know what a value of a dollar is because they never had to work in their lives. And the kids are now, 40 plus years old, but they still don't understand how valuable that dollar is. And the parents, I've noticed in conversation, they don't actually, they want their kids to understand what it means for the kids to inherit that money because the parents sacrifice so much, and they want to be able to pass along the feeling of the sacrifice, the feeling that they went through as a kid. And so that's kind of where I'm coming in, like as a mediator to help these kids. So it is a lot also to do with emotions and money. And so it's not just the mathematical aspect of money, but it's also figuring out the emotions that are related to money.
Yeah. Well, essentially speaking, it's just being able to manage your finances even nowadays with college being exponentially more expensive, housing market being the way it is right now, especially after 2008, and just various aspects that are changed since, and also income hasn't really increased that much when it comes to most jobs. Oh yeah, so there's a show called Adam Ruins Everything, and he talks about how people don't feel comfortable talking about their finances, or like especially at work, they don't tell their coworkers how much they make. So you could be working with somebody who has the same job as you, and they make $1 less than you. The person next to you who has the same job could be making $5 more than you per hour. That's an extreme example, but that's because people never communicate with that. And certain companies are able to get away with that because people have this kind of taboo mindset of sharing information like that.
That's very true. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why so many of us struggle with money, right? When it comes to college debt, like you said, student loan debt in 2020 is over $1.56 trillion. It's just a staggering amount. I think there are like 45 or more million borrowers of the student loan debt. It's just unbelievable. And I think part of that is because, like you said, it is taboo. It's a subject that's kind of hands off. I think it's a subject that a lot of people believe it is offensive if you bring it up, or people just aren't comfortable talking about money because money is obviously a very foreign concept to many. And I don't blame them because, again, we're not taught about money in school, in middle school and high school and even in college. And chances are that's also a reason why there is so much student debt out there, because students, they just don't know what is a subsidized loan, what is an unsubsidized loan, how does interest work, and why, if I just make the interest payment, why does that not dip into my principal? So a lot of these concepts are just not taught to us from an early age. And yes, absolutely, that's why there is so much difficulty out there with money.
Yeah. Well, and I'll certainly say that you and I both are quite self-taught, and there's a question or two later on talking about that, so we'll get into that more then. But there's also the fact that, like, in high school, for example, I took Intro to Money Management, I took Careers, I took Intro to Business, and Personal Finance, which is that one was required. Various different business and money-centric courses that didn't teach me hardly anything that I needed to know.
It's really unfortunate. I actually, I was asked, I want to say probably a few months ago, to write an article about how to fill out a check. And I was asked to present that topic to a local high school here. And, it's so just fascinating, really, to see that a lot of people don't know how to fill out a check. And to be very honest, I didn't either when I was in high school or college even. And that's because I wasn't really, I didn't really care about check writing.
Yeah.
I didn't care about it. Didn't interest me. But B, too, no one taught it to me. So no one taught it to me. I wasn't aware about it. I wasn't going to go out of my way and figure out how to do it. But, I think little simple things like that are really crucial to help people better understand even the inner workings of money. How to make money and how to spend money is common knowledge, essentially, right?
Right.
But what happens in between that making and spending money, that's what I love focusing on. And that's really what kind of got me started in finance, too.
On just a slight tangent here, I loathe checks. I think they're archaic and we need to get rid of them. I was a cashier for many years, so that's partially why.
Yeah, I hear you because it's paper. Like, let's be real here. Paper is basically becoming outdated, like you
Right.
said. I mean, we have Zelle, we have Venmo, we have all of these different...
PayPal.me and all that stuff.
Exactly. We have so many different platforms out there. But, the older institutions, the more traditional ones, they definitely still require that. Or, like, if you sign up for a mortgage, for example, you get a refi, the first 2 to 3 months, typically, you have to, use a check. But absolutely, it's definitely becoming an outdated thing.
Well, and I don't know. I don't see why you can't just send an electronic check or just using like a money order or something like that. It's one of those things. There's alternatives to it. Going off to the next question here too. Finance is a really interesting niche to be in, and it seems like you've carved your area well. What are some of the challenges you face as a creator?
Yeah, I'll start out with the first one, and that's just being kind of in a more of a male-dominated industry, right? So I think I was the only girl in my master's class to take financial literacy. So there all other were guys, and they were all super helpful, extremely nice. But there's definitely something about that where when maybe you don't perform really well in a specific subject or category, and you question yourself, like, am I supposed to be here? Is this really my niche? Is this really what I want to do? Because in the end, there are times where it definitely feels lonely being the only woman there. Mm-hmm. But I also learn a lot from my male colleagues. And mainly that is they are really good at keeping emotion out of anything that has to do with finance. And I think that's a really good point, because the more calm you are and the more you separate your emotions from dealing with money, the more clear-minded you become, actually, and do better choices as it relates to anything. Personal finance, like with your own money, or finance related to your clients. And I think that the emotional factor really is a reason why maybe men are a little bit better in finance or in other areas, like Formula One racing, for example, because they're able to really separate their emotions, think about things a little bit more clearly with a little bit better of a perspective. And that's something that I learned. I definitely struggled with it in the beginning, but I learned that from my colleagues. And I think because of that, because of being exposed in something that was perhaps a little bit uncomfortable in the beginning, I became a better financial planner through that.
Yeah. So what sort of challenges have you faced as a creator then, creating content around it?
Ooh, with my blog, oh my goodness. Let's just say I did not know where to start. I knew that there was a need for financial planning, and I knew there was a need for spreading the word about financial literacy. And the reason why I knew that there was a need out in the community is because I started a nonprofit in my local community, and I was able to interview, hundreds probably of young professionals. And each of these young professionals, they were extremely intelligent, really, really intelligent. They were the bright stars of the future. But one thing that was in common across many different industries was that they didn't really know about money, and they didn't really know what to do with their money once they earned it. So I realized that there was a need to help spread kind of the gospel of financial literacy. And that's when I started the Millennial Money Woman. But I started it, but I really didn't know how to develop a blog that was A, effective, B, user-friendly, and C, would also rank, high in Google. So I think, the biggest struggle was really figuring out how to optimize everything. So my education, for one point, how to optimize my writing skills to be clear and effective and communicate the subjects, and C, to actually provide a user-friendly digital experience. So I really had to combine a couple of different subject areas and focus then on developing a website platform that was, through SEO optimization, digital content, digital marketing. So I really had to focus on all of that, but I started from scratch. So my struggle really was filtering out so much noise out there, and figuring out which sources were the right ones to pursue to become and to create this platform that I have now. And I'm still learning. It's not perfect. I'm always learning.
Oh yeah, I started my first blog in 2011. So the things you're facing now, I was lucky enough to start facing back then when it was easier. But even then, and now SEO isn't as important as it was, but it's also still extremely important. If you neglect it, you're going to have issues with a lot of different platforms, even like Pinterest, for example.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. It is such a changing landscape, really. And I feel like every time, like even, for example, let's go into Twitter. The Twitter algorithm and even Pinterest, they all have algorithms, right, to optimize and bring up your posts or your pins to be like the first ones in the feed. And when I first started using those platforms to promote the Millennial Money Woman, there was a certain type of algorithm. And I was doing really well at that. But then all of a sudden, the algorithm apparently changed, and I had to relearn my entire strategy, right? And that took so much time to just learn it. And again, to your point, everything in this landscape, in this digital, high-speed, high-tech landscape, I feel there's so many changes all the time, right? Even my web host platform,
Who do you use?
I use HostGator. It's great, but they make updates, and then sometimes my website goes down, and I'm on the phone. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's stressful. It's always the push to learn new things and to stay on top of the changing landscape. So that's a huge struggle.
Well, self-education obviously is a great thing there. Having that skill to be an autodidact, that's a very important aspect. And you are right, yeah, these platforms change. My whole ethos, in a way, is being omni-channel. And so instead of just working on two platforms, I'm trying to work on like a dozen or something like that. And it's always funny because all these content creator experts always say, pick one, stick to it, then expand from there. But I've always felt that like there is a way to do all of them at once. If you can find the right strategies, find the right tools, you can do it even as a solopreneur. So this leads me to my next question actually pretty well. Something I found interesting is that you only stuck with just Twitter and Pinterest as your main channels. So what about those platforms interest you the most?
That's a great point. And actually, I have been reading, obviously, a lot of information from successful bloggers, and I'm using their advice, actually, which, is focus on one or two platforms at most and really become good at that. So I started with that advice in mind. So that's what I think. First, I started Pinterest and really tried to get in depth, and I was actually doing really well on Pinterest. I mean, at one point we were getting probably over 250,000 views a month. And then the algorithm changed, and now, it went down to, I don't know, 20 or 16,000.
Yeah, I have a note here saying 16,000 monthly viewers. Wow.
Yeah. So it's not bad, but the algorithm completely changed, and I think it changed twice since I started. So, I need to change my entire approach, like even the content creation to using outside platforms to help promote my actual pins and the timing of it. So that has been an up and down battle, but I have been fairly consistent with Pinterest. And Twitter, I thought, would be a good platform because it's a lot more focused on engagement. Pinterest obviously is not. Pinterest is really just content creation. and like art, creativity. And then Twitter is more so about connecting, like truly connecting and engaging with your audience. And Twitter, I find, definitely takes up more of my time just because of that amount of time and effort I put in trying to, ask questions and really get to know my audience. But I really enjoy using those two platforms. That being said, though, I think after, probably the end of this year, my next goal is actually to expand out, hopefully using a couple of other platforms such as Facebook. I have started, a small page, but haven't done anything. But that's my next step. So kind of expanding outward from there.
If I may interject, I love this omnichannel approach. And one of the things I've noticed is that there's certain platforms where you want to focus on for engagement, and there's certain platforms you just want to automate. And for example, Pinterest for me wasn't necessarily my most important, despite the fact self-development, which is part of my sub niches, is a big prevalent piece on there. I didn't want to focus too much on that platform, so I automated my Instagram posts to go to Pinterest, for example, and that way I have something on there until I get a better Pinterest strategy. And it's interesting because there's tools like Placid, and the website's called placid.app, and then there's also Banner Bear, which actually help you generate images for your open graph for like Pinterest automatically, or for Twitter or something like that. I thought that was kind of interesting how you can use tools like that to automate some of your image creation once you built these templates, or use Canva, which I'm sure you probably touched on a little bit.
Yep.
And make templates in Canva and just kind of crank them out like that. But it is interesting how if you can find systems like that, you can make things much more easier to do by yourself.
Oh, definitely. I think automation is probably one of the key reasons why I'm able to sleep at night.
Yeah.
I mean, even for Twitter, right? So what I ended up doing lately is basically scheduling out my entire week of pins, or I'm sorry, tweets in this case. And even my pins, right? I use Tailwind. That's one of the applications that really, I think it's great. It's an amazing way to really schedule everything ahead and to get to know people maybe a little bit more in depth than if you were just on Pinterest itself. So definitely automation is one of the key things that helps me a lot in my life. And not just necessarily with the social media platforms. Automation also helps me with investing, because as I automate my investments, my savings, whatever it is, it just, out of sight, out of mind. I don't need to worry about it.
I think that automation done right, which I think you're doing right, is a good way to go about it. I've talked to people about like, hey, what is the path to polymathy? Well, you can do multiple different things at once, kind of like a jack of all trades approach, where people say it's unfocused, but it's more about just diversifying your attention and micro focusing on different things at one point. But like you said, you have to kind of time chunk. You have to organize it really well for that to be successful. Otherwise, you are just wasting time. Or you focus on one thing and then move on to the next one right after. And I debate in my head oftentimes which one is better.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. I mean, I think, obviously one thing in life that really separates the heroes or the great people from the good is that never-ending desire to learn, right? Mm-hmm. That insatiable learning desire. So that's something that I really follow. Like, I love learning. I love being curious about just about everything. And I think, obviously familiarizing yourself with those different channels out there is really one of the best ways to get ahead in the game, to be one of the best bloggers, one of the best, whatever it is in your industry, is by really associating yourself or acquainting yourself with those different ways to promote, to market yourself. And it's going to take time, but that's where I think superior time management skills really come into play, and prioritization.
Yeah. Well, and I just experienced something last night where I was like, okay, I'm going to consolidate some of the efforts that I made. I don't like Medium as a platform, and so I took all my stories off of it and moved it to Substack. But I'm also kind of feeling like Substack might not be the best one. I also had another blog on a blockchain platform. These were all side ones versus my main one on my website. But I was like, okay, let's consolidate them to one spot. And now I'm even thinking, well, maybe I'll move to a new host and move everything into one place and just separate it from the main blog. And so it's just a matter of constant iteration, like we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Which host are you using right now?
So unlike HostGator, I'm using Hostinger, which is kind of a similar one, and it's a little bit cheaper actually, but I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm not liking WordPress, and I've used it for a long time. I don't like it. It's too clunky.
Yeah, there's WordPress is for the unfamiliar person, unacquainted person. There is just so much going on, and it's not extremely user friendly. So it's
That's
I
the
can
thing.
understand. Yeah.
I am acquainted with it. I've been with it for
Oh,
9 years. That's the
oh my
problem.
God.
I also tried Wix too, but that's not originally the point. My next little sub question here is actually talking about: have you tried building thought leadership on Quora, which is because you have obviously a deep level of knowledge.
I love Quora, and I also like Reddit too. I mean, though I really love those types of platforms where it sounds like a lot of people, respondents in particular, they provide thoughtful answers, like you said, thought leadership. To answer your question, I have not yet done anything with Quora. However, I have been following the finance section and really the education section too, just those broad topics, broad terms, in quite depth. And I follow Quora on almost a daily basis. To the point where I'm worried that I'm addicted actually to that. I mean, like I
Well,
really enjoy it.
you're one step away then just from answering questions. And what's interesting is that I have 460,000 views on that platform now, and I don't really I only made like 300 answers, which is a lot, but I just did it daily for about half a year, twice essentially, and that got me to where I am now. But I think for you, your niche is so different than mine in a way that you would actually do better on there than I would.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have never really thought about doing it every day, but that's amazing. 460,000 views. That's fantastic.
And I'm not sure how much that converts to traffic to my site. It's not about traffic so much. I think a lot of marketers go on there and think, oh, I'm just going to get traffic. I'm going to put my blog post and get people on there. It's more about thought leadership, also understanding what people want. So, like, you're already viewing what people are asking, so you can make blog posts based off their questions.
That's a very good point. Absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of questions out there, even for my mentorship program, that I've heard so many times. Like, I could literally create an FAQ, frequently asked questions section on
And
my
that's perfect.
blog. That's a fantastic point. I love this brainstorming
Yeah.
together. This is great.
Well, and that's I get very didactic, and I try not to be too much on this show, but this is something that I really love, so I can't help it. And the next one's actually kind of similar too. One last idea: what are your thoughts on TikTok?
Okay, so I have actually thought about that before, or even YouTube, right? So I don't think I'm at the point yet to do that, but it was something that was in the pipeline, possibly next year or the year after. However, what I was thinking is possibly doing something along the lines of like a 60-second financial tip of the day type thing. So it would be really just like a blurb. It would be going out there, especially like TikTok, right? That's fairly, I think the younger generations probably use that more so than the older ones. Is that right?
Well, I've been on there since Musically, so nearly 2 years, and I've definitely seen there's a lot of Gen Z, but there's a lot of millennials on there.
Yeah.
And so I think more so than YouTube, that channel is probably the best for you considering that's more of your niche, your persona.
Yeah, I've thought that too. And actually, I had one of my mentors recommend TikTok to me over YouTube as well. So that was something I dabbled in. Like, I didn't actually post any videos, but I did think about it, did some research. I think it's a really cool tool. Again, just to really get across some pretty basic like
Yeah.
topics, right? Not going into too much depth because I don't want to lose my audience's, point of view or attention.
Yeah.
But it is a really neat platform to just blurb it out, right? Like literally say what you got to say and boom, move on to the
Well,
next.
someone you might use as a case study then, or kind of an example, is someone I had on the show, Anastasia Marchenkova. She's a great content creator, and she does quantum computing and quantum physics, and she makes content on TikTok on that advanced concept. And she's making short little 1 minute blurbs on these advanced concepts and actually making it simple enough for people to understand. And I think that's kind of the same kind of thing that you would have to do. And if she can do it with quantum physics, I'm sure you could do it with finance. You know what I mean?
Definitely, yeah. That's great.
So, something you mentioned earlier that I actually wanted to touch on too is that you hold a Master of Science in Personal Finance Planning. What inspired you to pursue that degree?
Ah, yes. So, I think I wanted to just get a little bit more into the topic of financial planning. So, becoming a certified financial planner, that requires hundreds of hours of studying. I mean, it's a really, really intense and rigorous program. But I wanted to be able to apply that, the educational, like purely the conceptual information, which is really what you learn in a CFP course, Certified Financial Planner course. And I wanted to apply that more analytical side to actual case studies. And I think that case study approach I was really able to obtain through my Master of Science lesson plan, if you will. And I was really happy to interact with the professors and with my other classmates, and we were thrown into multiple group projects, and I really liked too hearing from so many different perspectives out there. And unfortunately in the CFP coursework, it was basically every man for themselves, right? So it was, you get the books, you study for it, you take the test, and then hopefully you pass and you get your degree. And the test is like 7 hours long, so it is very rigorous. But with the master's degree, you're actually able to kind of bounce off ideas of the people in your group. You're able to really focus and pick apart a case, and everyone has a different background. And I think that was the really neat thing about this program,
Right.
because one person might have a background in insurance, and they bring up maybe an insurance thought process that I didn't think about before because I don't specialize in insurance. Or another person is really focused on ultra high net worth clients, and they bring up a really cool estate planning concept to transfer assets, in a tax efficient manner. So there's so many different perspectives in that group case study approach in a master's degree that I got so much out of that program, and that was really the reason why I decided to pursue that specific program.
That's an interesting point too, because with all these different point of views, you're going to be able to get a more holistic approach that way too, and it also impacts how you think once you leave that degree.
That's exactly right. And that was my hope, right? I mean, I wanted to get that knowledge and that diverse background from everyone in my group so I could apply that to my clients once I work with them. So I think it was a great benefit. Like, it was a win-win for both situations.
Yeah. And so that being your official education, you also had a ton of self-education, like we mentioned earlier. In your senior year, for example, of college, you set yourself a goal to read one financial education book each day. So how did that go?
You know what? I actually did it for my entire senior year. And
Great.
it was a lot of reading, obviously. But what I ended up doing was I actually went to stores like Goodwill, right? Some stores that weren't that popular. And I looked at the financial planning sections there. And I found some really cool books. Obviously, Millionaire Mindset. Almost everyone knows about that. Dr. Stanley's information, studies, surveys. I thought that was fascinating. But another book that I found, and I still have that actually on my nightstand today, it's called The Behavior Gap. The Behavior Gap, it's by Carl Richards, and it's such a cool book because the subtitle, it's called Simple Ways to Stop Doing Dumb Things with Money. And it's basically for the everyday person. It's, I think, like 200 pages or something. It's a very easy to understand financial book, but it speaks more to the mindset and the emotion related with finance versus the analytical part of finance. And
Right.
it literally creates drawings, right? So it helps people, like drawings on the back of a napkin, essentially. Literally, the drawings are on the back of a napkin, and it helps readers really visualize and understand, when should you maybe not buy money? Or I'm sorry, when should you not get into the stock market? Or when should you maybe get into the stock market? So it really explores the mentality behind money.
That's interesting too, and it seems like I don't want to go into too much on a tangent on this, but my modular degree concept that I talk about with PolyInnovator is talking about finding resources like those books you mentioned, or maybe courses or audiobooks or something like that, and putting it together in a list for you to tackle. And it's more just organizing your self-education, because that's what you did there. You went and got one book to read each day, and you were able to expand upon what you were learning much more effectively that way.
That's exactly right. I mean, there's such a wealth of knowledge out there. It's
There
just really
is.
up to you to find it.
Yeah. So, what were some of your early life lessons that you faced?
I think there are so many out there. I think the first major life lesson, and I would probably tell myself this if I could, 5 or however many years ago this was, after college, right? In college, I lived in this tiny little dorm, so 200 square feet or so. I mean, tiny, tiny, tiny. And I was so sick and tired of living in this really small living quarter that I just wanted to live in a huge space that would take me like 30 seconds to walk from one end to the other, or like 20 seconds, I don't care. But I wanted to live in a big space. And when I went out of college and I got my first job, I got this too big of an apartment for me. It wasn't luxury or anything, but it was much, much bigger than what I needed. And by bigger space, that also meant a lot more money. And when I look back at that, I think that was probably one of the biggest life lessons I learned. And that is, how much house, or in this case, apartment, do you really need for yourself? And the bigger the apartment or the living space in general, the more it typically costs. And I could have saved probably $1,000 if I could, when I came out of college. And just because I got such a large space. And now I'm thinking, okay, if I was able to save $1,000 a month on rent, where would I be now in my financial career, right? It would have been invested. I would have probably seen a gigantic return. And that's where I really kick myself, because I was in college for so long. I studied. I was in a tiny little cramped and crowded area, and I just wanted to enjoy my life. And I think that happens very often, where people study for so much, or they give up a lot of their time and they sacrifice, and then all of a sudden they just want to spend everything, on a car, on a really nice car or a really nice house. And we forget about toning it down. Like, moderation is key. So that was that huge life lesson I learned from that mistake. Just moderate yourself. And I lost perspective when I came out of college. And I know now, what it means to have that better perspective, because it helps my wallet in the end.
It does. And I personally have always had a minimalist mindset, and I don't know if before our call you might have seen my office space, and there's very little in the background there because it's just completely empty. But the problem is I'm also a techie, and so I try to be minimalist, but I also want to have the best computer components or have consoles to play or something like that. And so it's a constant battle for finances. Like, do I want to spend money on tech, or do I want to have a minimalist lifestyle? And the same thing goes for living too. I actually wanted to improve my living situation a couple years ago, and so I moved from a mediocre apartment to a renovated one in the same complex, and it was almost $200 more a month, which is ridiculous, or at least 100 something. And the problem was, it looked nice. It had new appliances and improved counters and floors and stuff like that. Ironically, it actually leaked throughout the windows every time it rained. And so not only was it a decreased experience, despite the fact it was nicer, it also costed way more. So after that, me and my roommate decided, okay, let's try to find a cheaper place. And we managed to find an apartment that was on sale, essentially, because they wanted to get people in there for $200 less a month, which was even cheaper than the mediocre apartment that I had before, and not much worse quality either. And so we were able to save a ton of money because of that. But it was interesting how the want for betterness, or not betterness, but the want for an improved experience actually was not really that worth it.
Absolutely. It's great that you mentioned that. I had a really good friend of mine, and she also, fairly same story, worked very hard. I think, I want to say medical profession, don't know exactly what type of doctor degree, but she basically became a doctor, worked so hard. And when she finished her schooling and her residency, et cetera, and really started earning some money, she decided to upgrade from her 10-year-old Toyota to a, I think, $80,000 Audi. And beautiful car, but she was so afraid of taking road trips or whatever it is, because she didn't want anyone to scratch or dent her car, that in the end she actually got less pleasure and less satisfaction out of it, because she was so worried that people would damage her car versus her 10-year-old Toyota. She didn't really care, right? She's like, whatever, whatever happens. So she had a little bit more enjoyment. Or same thing with a really nice pair of shoes. You're very worried when you take it out, and you watch like every single step. You don't want to step into a puddle. You don't want to, scratch the leather on the shoes if they're leather. So you get a little bit less enjoyment out of that. So definitely, I understand that concept.
Before moving on to the next question too, it kind of comes down to clothing as well, where I've always a very stylish person growing up. I tried to learn how to be a stylish man and be a gentleman and have good style, good taste. But then I also was like, I don't care that much about my clothes. I want to wear clothes as long as possible, wear my shoes out until I can. Like, I just bought black shoes so that they look good with everything, and that's it. Like, I don't care about if they look raggedy or not, because I'll get a new one when they're destroyed. But I just realized that some of my pants now have holes because I've worn them for too long. And so it's like one of those things where, like, okay, now it's time to get new clothes. But it's just frustrating because, like, okay, my style is good because I simplify things, and now I don't have that decision fatigue in the morning. What do I need to wear? That kind of thing. But there's also the point of quality sometimes lasts longer. What's your thoughts on that?
I absolutely agree with that. So the way I measure or justify some purchases include using this mindset called buying like a CPU. So that's kind of cost per use. So if you buy, for example, a $500 briefcase, but you use, or $500 shoes, let's say, and obviously that's expensive, but if you are able to use those $500 shoes, 500 days in a row without having any issues, that's basically $1 a day. Now, if you multiply, if you have 1,000 days, that's 50 cents a day, right? That you actually wear these shoes. Versus if you buy cheaper shoes, maybe they're $100 or $50, but after 100 days or so, they break. What is the actual cost per use you get out of that specific piece of clothing? So
Right.
that's kind of how I try to justify those purchases, or like more expensive electronics, for example. Yes, they might be more expensive in the upfront part, but down the road, how much more utility do you get out of that specific electronic? And the chances are, if it's really high quality, you'll probably get, a decade or so out of it. I mean, it depends, but the point is the cost per use goes down quite drastically.
Now, I'm a techie, so when I hear CPU, I don't hear cost per use. I hear computer processing unit. So, as in like the CPU, the brain of a computer. And the same rule applies there too. When you spend a little bit more on a better CPU, it's going to last longer. For example, I built my computer with one of the top of the line CPUs from 3 generations ago, and it still runs better than half of the new ones that come out. I also built my roommate's computer with one of the second best or third best CPUs of that generation. And it still runs really great, and he's going to be able to use it for another 5 years, especially since he's not super picky about it. But he's going to have to upgrade in the next couple of years, whereas mine's going to last another 8 if I want to.
That's amazing. And that, again, just that alone, hearing that your CPU lasts for 3 generations or more, I think that really justifies the cost of things, because, in the end, it just comes down to how much utility and value does it provide you.
Well, and let's also just clarify that generations mean like 2 years. But
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you're quite the specialist, I would say, and by looking at your online presence, I can tell that you're much more from financial content creator to marketer, CFPR, founder, polyglot, autodidact, and more. I always love it when I can do that and run out of breath out of all the things I'm explaining about that person, so that's good. How do you balance all the various areas of your life?
Oh my goodness, that's tough. I have become, I would say, quite the master in time management. So I also don't, my body itself doesn't need a lot of sleep, and I'm very lucky to be that type of person. I know people that need like 9 to 10 hours of sleep to be effective and efficient. I need about 4 to 5 hours of sleep, and I'm fine. Yeah, so I'm very lucky in that sense. So, I basically work, I typically wake up between 3:30 and 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
And yeah, and I'm up, and that includes weekends, and I'm up from 4 until probably like, I want to say 10 o'clock at night or so. And I work basically the entire day. So I, work on the blog. I spend over, 120 hours plus a week or so on it. And, every single day, but it doesn't seem like work. It
yeah.
is my absolute passion. Like, I pour my heart and soul into it, and I love it. So it's not this job like, oh my God, I cannot wait until it's, 4 p.m. and I want to
Yeah.
get out, and you're counting down the time. Not at all. I love what I'm doing. So that's kind of how I manage that.
I agree. It's one of those things where, like with PolyInnovator, for example, I spend probably the same amount of hours working on it a week, and it's like I've been going through some frustrating things lately, deciding whether or not I want to keep my website, for example, like I mentioned earlier, or creating this content that I've been meaning to create for weeks now, and it's like, but it's not something I would not want to do. I worked 3 jobs at one point just so I can come home and work on PolyInnovator. And it's like, okay, this is obviously what I'm enjoying to do. It is interesting how you only have to sleep 4 to 5, because I've looked up sleep chronotypes and circadian rhythms, and you're one of those sleep elite, which is rare, it seems.
Yeah. It is very rare, and it's funny because in the beginning, when I, probably teenage years or so, I needed probably 8 to 9 hours of sleep to be like optimal efficiency in school, and I was always at the top in school. But now, as I grew a little bit older, it's kind of reverse thinking, but as I grew older, I actually needed less hours of sleep. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because my mentor, he's probably in his mid 70s now, but he's a serial entrepreneur, extremely successful business ventures, and he also still in the mid 70s only needs like 5 hours of sleep to be optimally efficient. And it's just fascinating to see this energy that he has. Like going up the stairs, he literally bounds up, two stairs at a time at like 75 or however old he is. It's just unbelievable.
That's Ikigai for you right there. But also, you said it's kind of reversed, but it's not so much because teenagers biologically need more hours of sleep because they're growing so much. And going back to the sleep chronotypes, I'm still needing to learn more about it, so I'm not an expert. But from what I was learning, they were saying that it changes throughout your life as well. It doesn't have to, but usually it changes every 7 years or so.
That's very interesting that you bring that up because actually I did, I noticed that through stages. I've been very aware. Like I think I'm probably more self-aware than others about, my body needs, like what does my body need to function and how much of it, like do I need carbs? Does my body functions really well on carbs? And what type of exercise do I need? When am I really efficient in during the time of day, and it's in the morning. So I try to tailor my entire schedule of like the most important tasks are always done in the morning because I'm extremely efficient then. I can definitely agree that I've noticed that change as I started, going through my preteens, teens, and now my 20s. And didn't know that it changes every 7 years, but I definitely agree that I have felt that change.
Well, and it's interesting too that you mentioned that you know yourself very well, which I think a lot of successful people have a high self-awareness. You need to in order to understand. And I don't want to go too much on this just yet, but I have a 4 pillars philosophy that I made for self-development where it talks about the mind, the body, the spirit, and emotions. And that 4 kind of holistic approach areas to the major aspects of your life, when you understand each of them, it actually makes you more successful in the long run.
That makes a lot of sense, and I like your approach to that. It really does show that all of those 4 aspects are completely intertwined. Absolutely.
Well, and there was something else about sleep that I wanted to mention. Yeah, and so the circadian rhythm, a lot of the stuff I learned about that came down to knowing what your prime hours are. So, for example, for me, it's like 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. For some reason, when I hit those points, that's when I wake up. And that's one reason why I always had a hard time in school because 2 of my classes were before 10 a.m. And so I wasn't able to function very well until I got to like my third or fourth hour.
That makes sense. And I think as we shift more to an online present in college and maybe even high school or middle school, hopefully more people will take advantage of that, wherever they are more efficient. Like for me, it would have been early morning hours, at least now. Back then, not so much, but they are hopefully able to get more out of their time in school. So that would be fantastic.
Over these interviews that I've had, we've talked about how COVID has been changing a lot of things. And one of the things has been such as like working from home or having school from home. And because of that, people are actually able to work more aligned with their circadian rhythm. And so productivity has increased because they actually have a better energy output for when they're actually doing their work.
I can see that, absolutely. I mean, I talk to my friends too, my young professional friends, and a lot of them are actually night owls. So they're up until like 1, 2 a.m. Like
Same.
they basically go
That's
to
me.
bed when I wake up.
Yeah, that's me right there. It's crazy.
That's awesome. But yeah, they say they get all their work done at night, and they said they actually get it done in much shorter time than when they would at the work office hours. So
Yeah.
that's amazing. Yeah.
And just to kind of note too, our last 2 little tangents we had, I want to mention is that they were both very polymathic. We talked about a lot of different areas coming together, like the 4 pillars, for example, and also like diet and sleep and how they all interact. And that's one of the beauties of this show is like I try to keep, that's why I call it a polycast, much or many topics on this cast, because that's what we just did. And this leads into my next question very well, is that something I ask all of my guests is, what is a polymath to you?
Oof, that's a great question. So obviously I think a polymath is someone that becomes really competent, very familiar with the many different topics in 3 or more diverse areas. And I think that a polymath specifically is able to positively integrate these specialties, like this deep understanding of these different domains to achieve a skill that is basically in the top 1%. And I think, I was thinking about different ways to better explain what a polymath is. And I think part of it also really comes down to creativity and innovation. Like I think polymaths, they're able to, it's just their way of thinking. Like they're able to solve problems, like approach a problem from a very different perspective because they have insight from so many different areas. And, they're able to bring that new perspective that helps kind of inspire, motivate, and really revolutionize the status quo to make people kind of go outside of their comfort zones. So in a way, they're able to make people be comfortable while being uncomfortable and inspire them to like create entirely new processes. So I think like the best example that I can think of right now, at least, is Ben Franklin. I think Ben Franklin is just like such an incredible polymath because, as we know, he's one of the founding fathers of America, right? He helped draft the Declaration of Independence. He started this vastly successful printing business in Philadelphia, I think. And then on top of that, he's an inventor, right? So he invented the lightning rod. He invented the glass harmonica. He invented, what else? Bifocals, I think, the Franklin stove, right? Like the list goes on and on. So it's not just in like music where he was super proficient in. He was not just proficient in communications by creating this printing press. He was also philanthropic. He like created a college, a hospital. He was a founding father. He was a diplomat. It's just unbelievable to see the vast amount of achievements he's found in his life. I was just like mind blown.
I love how you brought him up too, so thank you. I think that was fantastic. Is he a hero of yours?
Absolutely. And the reason why I know so much about him is because actually back in, my goodness, I want to say one of my college classes, they were going into real depth about some of the best people in the world. And, Da Vinci, Newton, Galileo, they were all the ones that were brought up. But I did this really extensive research paper on Ben Franklin. And so to answer your question, yes, he is a hero. I think he's done so much really to help not just the civilization back then, but he really helped, even our current civilization, like bifocals. It's something we still use in our everyday lives. And lightning rods, it's something that I still see everywhere, right? So it's amazing to see how he was able to have this energy and this focus that helped him become the top, like master so many skills and be at the top 1% of so many different areas.
Firstly, thank you for coming on the show. I love this, and I love the way you answered the question as well. And the way you feel about Franklin's how I feel about Da Vinci, and so you even brought him up too.
Yeah, Da Vinci too. Like he write things in mirror image, and he used like anatomy to really sculpt his paintings to make it more lifelike.
He used physics too, and understanding of just geometry to make a lot of his paintings. So if you look at some of the paintings, they're very scientifically accurate too when it comes to depth perception. It's insane.
Amazing. Yeah, these guys there, and we're obviously talking about people in the past, but I think some modern day polymaths, at least in my opinion, could include Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, even Charles Darwin. I think he's another one of the great ones.
It's funny because I've said the exact same thing on another episode.
That is awesome.
I would really like to know more female polymaths because I want to represent a lot of the more feminine past polymaths that we've had throughout history. Because when you look at polymath, it's always these old white guys. But there is the Arabic Renaissance, there is a lot of polymaths in China, a lot of polymaths in Japan. There's a lot of polymaths throughout the world, but a lot of times we only see the Greek or Italian or Caribbean-based ones.
We really do, and that's a good point. And even further, we don't really see a lot of female polymaths. I mean, the one I can think of probably is Marie Curie. I think she got, I think, a Nobel Prize. I think she won it twice, if I'm not mistaken. But she was extremely well known, especially as a female in her specific field, which was chemistry. I don't really know of any other.
I know some content creators who are, and I don't remember the exact name of the person, but before Alan Turing for the modern computer concept, there was another woman who was a scientist who actually basically discovered the kind of modern understanding of computers, and she's someone I want to do a piece on at some point. I gotta remember her name though. A short interjection here. So that person I was thinking of is Ada Lovelace, and I actually did do a piece on her, a blog post on my website you should go check out. But yeah, thank you for that too. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's amazing. But yeah, I wonder why it's more so men than women, and I'd be fascinated to know the answer.
Yeah, pivoting a bit, you've built a growing side hustle empire. What do you mean by that, and how did you do it?
Yeah, so that has to do with my blog, The Millennial Money Woman. And to answer your question, how did I do it? I think it's just because of passion and my work ethic. So obviously you can be passionate about something, right? Like, I don't know, dogs or marine biology or whatever it is. But I think the other aspect or component to that and to making something successful is that work ethic and the dedication. Because quite frankly, even though I am very passionate about financial literacy and helping people improve their lives, I think if I didn't have my work ethic, so like every day, weekends, whatever it is, waking up at 4 in the morning, right, starting my journey, working on my blog every single day, I don't think I would be where I am now. And that is, being recognized on Twitter, being recognized on Pinterest, and just in general in the community as, I guess if you would call me like an up-and-coming leader in personal finance. And
Yeah.
it's not because, I position myself or I act snobby. No, it's because I really love it. As I said before, I pour my heart and soul into this. I really, truly believe I'm making a difference, like a positive difference in someone's life. And even if it's just one person, that's all I need. And I see the gratitude, though, too. And I think that's part of maybe more of a selfish motivation, because I see people actually smile when they hear, oh, this is what I can do to be a millionaire, or oh, this is what I can do to help my family be successful. Like, I like that feeling. I like that good feeling. And that's another reason why I do it.
I love that. And I think, too, you've exemplified a lot of the polymathic traits that I look for in a guest. And that's one reason why I like having strong women like yourself on the show, too, to exemplify the fact that there's people all over from all different backgrounds, all different kind of genders and shapes and sizes, I guess you could say, who are polymathic. And I want to exemplify those traits. I think what you just said there with your growing empire is a great example of that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You mentioned earlier you founded a nonprofit. What was that for?
Yeah. So as I started, right, in my path toward financial freedom for myself, but also started working for clients in the financial planning industry, I started realizing I wanted to give back in some way, shape, or form to the community. And, now it's obviously the Millennial Money Woman. Back then, though, 3 years ago or so, it was through this nonprofit. So what I did was I partnered with a local community foundation. And I sat down with one of the directors, and we really went through what my local community needed. And obviously, there's a lot of welfare programs. But one thing that I noticed was lacking, that was financial education. And I asked him a little bit more about it. And he said, yeah, we never really had anyone focus on financial education for a greater community. Would you be interested in doing it? And I said, yes, like I jumped at the chance. So what I ended up doing was I created this application questionnaire, and we got an overwhelming response. I thought we would get like 10 people to reply. I think we got like 50 people or more to reply within like a week of notice. So it was really short. But we got 50 people to reply and actually apply to my mentorship program, which is what it is, a financial literacy mentorship program. And what I do is basically I select 5 people each year from this application pool and really work with these 5 young professionals, millennials typically, on their financial goals and trying to help them achieve and accomplish whatever financial freedom means to them. So to provide some examples, I had a mentee that I helped basically leave a 6-figure paying job and build his own business. And, the anticipation here is that this business would grow into a 7-figure paying job. So, we built up the business plan, et cetera, and I was more of a sounding board to him.
Yeah.
And he did it all himself. And, at the end, I got a phone call from him, and he was like in tears, basically, this 30-year-old man, thanking me for everything that we've gone through, the ups and downs. So that is just probably one of the most gratifying moments I had. And, another one is I helped, one of my mentees to get rid of $29,000 of credit card debt. She is one of the up-and-comers in the community, but sometimes credit cards are very easy to use, right? Because we don't actually see the money leaving our hand. It's just a quick swipe.
Even debit cards, too, sometimes.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Psychological thing.
Oh, it is. Absolutely psychological. That's why I bet, Amazon Prime makes so much money, because it's just the click of a button and boom, there's a purchase made.
I have two different points I want to make off of that. Because first off, Gary Vee even talks about how, if kind of going back to the Ikigai thing, doing what you want to do, and if you're making $60,000 a year, but you hate the job you have, versus making a podcast talking about Star Wars, which is something you love, and you can make the same amount of money, why don't you do that? Even if it's more work, it's going to be more enjoyable, and that's kind of what you help that first mentee to do.
That's exactly right. And when I did that, that I think was kind of the start or the seed for the blog itself
Yeah.
because I love writing, right? I mean, I actually wrote books when I was a young kid, mystery books. And I just write, not on the computer. I wasn't that fancy. I actually had an notebook and by hand I wrote these, 100-page long mystery novels. And I've always had a profinity for writing. And then now paired with my passion for finance, there was a point where I was like, why don't I just put the two together and
Yeah.
create this personal financial literacy platform? So that was kind of the start.
Going off of that real quick, do you still have those?
I do, not
Okay.
with me here, but my
Yeah.
parents have the books actually, yes.
So, what I would even say is that when I was young, I used to write these video game kind of plots for a saga that I wanted to create. And something I think about kind of existentially is that we only have so much time to create in our life. And as kids, we're very creative. We don't have the inhibitions as an adult. So we create things that we really want to see in the world much more effectively without having that imposter syndrome or even just having that kind of inhibitions like, oh, I shouldn't make this. And so I was like, okay, how can I take what I made as a kid and make it as an adult? So one of the phases down the line is actually going to try to create those video games. And I was wondering maybe if you could go back and maybe just touch up on some of the stories you made and actually release them.
That would be amazing. And, back then, you're very right. I think I had a much more creative mindset than I do now. Like things just came to me and I was able to write about them and stuff that I probably can't do anymore today. So absolutely, I think that would be a really fun project.
Well, and again, it may not be finance oriented, but it will still get your name out there more, so you'll be more picked up upon and known like, oh, this person exists.
Definitely. And, I think even if it's not totally related to finance, I think hopefully it would kind of spur that creativity, the process of creativity. And who knows, maybe something that I find when I did back, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, probably more than that, is maybe helping me help inspires me to
Yeah.
add something to the website.
Well, and not only that, too, I was thinking about, I think I mentioned earlier how I was combining different blogs together. Part of that was because I also wanted to go back to writing every day, even if it's just like a bullet journal or just a rant or something like that, just getting the habit of writing again. Because part of my problem with my main series is that it starts off with a blog post, I turn that into a slideshow, turn that into a video, then I turn that into a polycast because it's just repurposing the content. But the problem is I have to start writing. It's the issue of just starting, not actual issue of making all four of those different things because they're all just a cycle. It's easy to do once I get started. But writing is the issue. I don't want to start writing. And so if I start doing that habit every day, because creativity and curiosity are just skills. People think that they're inherent, but they're just skills you have to cultivate. And so I'm thinking about if I just start writing again every day, like if you start writing your old stories again, it might just spur that content creation just by habit.
That's exactly right. And that's what I love, really. And that's why I love talking to people like you or, even my mentees, because it's a different, unique perspective. And I
Yeah.
think having those perspectives outside of just your own, kind of biased field, I think that really adds to kind of a cool little twist and touch to whatever project you're doing.
Now you know why I have these interviews.
Yeah.
No, and it's interesting too because that question I ask everybody, was a polymath to you, is that everyone gives me a different answer. And even though they might have the same underlying tones, oh, you do many different things and you're curious and that kind of thing, you went on a small little unique tangent when it came to your explanation, which I love. And now I'm going to have all these different perspectives. And what I intend to do is repurpose those questions, those answers, into its own episode one day of saying, like, these 50 people say this is what they think about that, or these 25, these 25, these 25, and break it up into these different little mini series now based off of those answers.
That's a great idea, actually. It's like a mural, basically,
Yeah.
except through verbal.
Yeah. Well, and again, this kind of goes back to the idea of content repurposing, which might be something that you might look into as well, just to be able to expand your content more.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you have a lot of blog posts, maybe you can use speechkit.io to make an audio format of your blogs.
I just wrote that down.
I'll
That's a
send you
great
link.
idea.
I've already
Yeah.
sent you like half a dozen links on Matchmaker, which I'll send you that one as well.
Perfect. Yeah.
Something you mentioned actually too is getting out of debt. How do you get out of debt? Yeah.
Definitely. Getting out of debt is probably one of the most common questions I hear. And yeah, I mean, I get it because there's so much debt out there, right? I mean, we start out with student debt, then we go to credit card debt, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of debt. And I think, the statistic is staggering how many people are in debt right now. And even more so, I think there's a statistic out there that shows that, 57% of Americans, they can't even cover a $500 emergency. And that's because we don't have that extra liquid cash, right, sitting around to help us for any unexpected expenses. And 30% of Americans actually have absolutely no emergency savings whatsoever. So there is a very big issue, I think, right there, just because we need to, very frankly, improve our financial game.
Yeah.
So the question is how to get out of debt. I think the first thing is figuring out how much you make and then figure out how much you spend. In other words, you want to create a budget. So you really want to figure out, where's your money coming from and where is it going to? And then you want to figure out, how much money is actually left over at the end of the month? Am I positive? Am I zero? Or am I actually negative? So, obviously, worst case scenario, you're negative. You're spending more than what you make, and that's not good. But now let's say you actually know what your number is, right? Are you negative? Are you at zero? Or are you positive, cash flow positive at the end of the month? Then we kind of figure out what are your actual goals, right? I think that's really important too. Is your goal to pay off credit card debt? Is your goal to buy a house down the road? Is whatever your goal is, to retire early? And then those goals kind of dictate how you form your budget. So again, let's say you have $10,000 of credit card debt and your goal is to pay that off within the next 2 years. How do you do that? That's when you start looking at your budget and you're going to try to figure out your expenses in 3 different pillars, if you will. So the first pillar is going to be a need, right? What do you really need to purchase? What is a necessity in your life? The second pillar is going to be, what is a want? Like, what do you really want in your life right now? And then the third pillar is a wish. What's your wish? Is vacation a wish? Typically it is. So that's how I categorize my expenses: a need, a want, and a wish. And then I try to figure out what can I actually leave out of this year. So let's say, am I willing to sacrifice a vacation for $3,000 or so this year, and instead move those $3,000 toward my credit card bill, my credit card debt? And chances are, if my actual financial goal is to pay off my credit card debt, yes, you should be doing that. You should give up your wishes for your actual financial goals. So again, the reason why I really like doing this exercise, writing down your goals first before creating your budget, is because now you have a reason why you're developing your budget the way you are, and that's because you're trying to pinpoint your financial goals and get toward that destination. So to answer your question, to pay off debt, it takes consistency and it takes really dedication. You need to be dedicated to pay off your goals. You can't, be deterred from your path.
Yeah.
If you see a cute little dog and you want to buy the dog, no, you can't do that right now. Right now is not the time. You can't spend money on a dog. You have to keep working toward your goal, and you have to show up every day in order to get that goal completed, whatever it is. You can't, like a diet, for example. If your goal is to, stop eating carbs, and I eat a lot of carbs, so I know how difficult it can be.
Right.
But you got to stick to it. You got to be consistent. And at some point, after I think 66 days or so, or 2 months roughly, that habit becomes automated behavior. And the more you practice that habit, the more likely you will reach your financial goals. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, more importantly, the habit becomes a system.
Exactly.
There's a lot of things I want to go off of there. Yeah, so with all those different areas too, it's sometimes just a matter of facing the problems that you're having and understanding the why. It almost made me think of Simon Sinek, start with why. What's your goals? What are you trying to do? And a lot of people just don't want to face that. They don't want to go on Google Sheets, which I don't think is the best tool for it, but it's the best one to start with if you need to, and just list out what are your expenses, what are your income sources. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 income sources depending on if you're married or not, but understanding where the money is going, like you said. One of my favorite tools actually is Notion, which I actually sent to you on Matchmaker as well, because you can do so much with it. And there's a YouTube channel called from August Bradley where he talks about making a life operating system so you can organize every aspect of your life. And it's interesting how I was able to put my expense tracking in there and calculate how much debt that I have, how much money am I making per month, and where does that stand. And it gives you kind of like this unique perspective.
That's exactly right. And actually, off of your point that most people don't really want to peel back the layers of the onion, if you will. I was actually there too, because in college, I'm pretty sure, like most college students, I hated cooking. And so I went and I ate out quite a bit, albeit it was cheap, right? I went to like McDonald's or whatever, but I never actually wanted to know how much I spend each month because I knew it was more than what I should be doing. But my mindset was, as long as I don't, know what I'm actually spending, I'm okay.
Yeah.
But that's wrong, right? You
Yeah.
want to know. You want to figure out what is that exact number amount, that exact dollar amount that you're spending on whatever it is that you're spending, and then figure out a way to reduce it. Like, you don't have to go from hero to zero, but you do want to kind of figure out that moderation. And that comes back to that topic, right? Balance is key.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because ignorance is bliss. And
Yeah.
back in high school, I was the same way. I didn't do so much in college age, but like in high school, I would go to Taco Bell for lunch. Granted, the school lunch was terrible, and so like going out to eat was almost a need. But I didn't know how much I was spending on that. And I probably could have saved a lot more money back then. I also was in debt as a teenager because I had a credit card. I managed to pay it off by my really early 20s, but still, I racked up too much debt by that age. But there was something else I was going to mention too. Oh yeah, online banks seem to be doing really well at certain features. So I have Chime, which I hate because of their customer service. I'll state that right now. I hate the bank, but they have a couple features that I think that every bank needs to copy. Is that for one, they allow you to save automatically, so 10% every time you get paid, as well as you can round up to the next dollar and put that towards your savings, which I think is fantastic. The other thing is you can organize how much you're spending with this little graph chart. So it'll tell you, okay, you spent this much on gas, this much on groceries, this much on eating out, this much on bills. And it'll tell you roughly, sometimes it doesn't calculate each thing as part of that category, but for the most part, it's pretty accurate. And it tells you how much you spent on that like specific area.
That's right. That's a fantastic tool. And then obviously I'm sure you've heard of Mint as well, or You Need a Budget. That's another really neat tool where it's visual. So I think it's really helpful for the people that are a little bit more of a visual person, than more so just like a bare bones analytical person that would probably use Excel more so. And it's a fantastic tool tracker too, because it'll tell you like when you're over your budget in a specific category, and then how to really be adaptable and flexible so you can change other spending areas of your budget to kind of match where you overspent that month.
Yeah. Well, and not to sound too salty too, but that's one reason why I do the videos for these polycasts, so that way people can have the people who want to see stuff, they can have that aspect. So after this, I'm going to do some kind of visualizer or kind of audiogram, so to speak, for it.
Yeah. Cool.
No, but I thought it was really kind of funny to throw that in there. But personally, I think I've done well with managing money to a degree. Like, I'm in debt. I know that. I know that I'm in the negative, but I try to be mindful about the budget and be minimal about some expenditures. And I've decreased how much money I spend on groceries, for example. And from either being a contractor and not saving for taxes because I didn't know I had to, or having a low income month here and there, it seems like every year around this time of year, I get 1 month where I just make significantly lower than my average. And because of that, it puts me back a little bit. And so what are some ways for millennials to increase income then?
Ooh, that's a great point. So actually for millennials and I kind of try to help people that have more of a fluctuating income. So if they're either working off of commissions or if they are an entrepreneur, like yourself, and it's really just up to them to earn money and they don't have a steady salary, typically what we do is we budget based off of whatever the lowest income earning month is. So that's kind of our baseline. And anything above that low income earning month, we use that toward like paying off debt, saving, or retirement investments, something like that. So we're really trying to start off at a really low basis. to live a little bit more conservatively, at least given their current income status. I think, one of the big things to increase income has to do with reducing or adjusting your current lifestyle. And we can do that in multiple ways. So either A, you actually increase your income, right? So you get a new job, you find a higher paying job, or you get a second job, or you start a side hustle business, right? So you can either make more income, or you can add to your income by reducing your expenses. So some ways could include getting a roommate to kind of help supplement your current costs of living. Another way could be to maybe be a little bit more conscious of what you're eating. So I have a really good friend. She goes to Whole Foods because she's extremely conscious of the food that she's putting into her body, which is great. She's super healthy. But obviously Whole Food is kind of like a whole paycheck, right?
Yeah,
like
it's
extremely expensive.
Yeah.
And she's not, she doesn't earn that much money either. So it's kind of, you give up going to Whole Food maybe, but for that you go to another store that has great produce, right? And you eat their produce section. But it's really just being able to be flexible and kind of adjust and roll with the punches, if you will, that life really serves you. And you just have to be conscious of what is going out in order to make sure that you don't overspend and lose your income, right? Or lose the money that you're trying to earn.
So I'm a personal trainer, and I also worked at Natural Grocers, which is kind of like Whole Foods for a long time, for about a year, I guess you could say. And so I have a lot of experience when eating healthy, and I managed to actually decrease my expenditure on that and just simplify my diet, which helps a lot for people like that, for if they're having that situation there. Let me throw a curveball at you then, because I've done all those things. I have a roommate. I decreased the rent by going to a cheaper apartment. I've tried to decrease subscriptions. I tried to decrease the amount of money I spend on food, especially going out. I've done all those basic things. What can I do then? I guess increase income.
In that case, if you've done all of the things to reduce your expenses, then I would say it's time to start looking maybe for a different job. In addition to your side hustle, right? It's going to be a lot of time, but...
Well, the side hustle doesn't make any income, really. It's the day work that gives me my income.
Then, okay, well, yeah, then in that case, I'd probably look for maybe a higher paying job, or could possibly consider moving to a less expensive area, because I know sometimes locations also have a fairly high cost of living, with rent or food even, etc. So that might be another thing. Or the last possible strategy that I've seen other people do is possibly move in with their parents while they build, their career or their income, and assuming their parents don't charge them a large amount or anything for rent, they could be saving rent that way, and you could be saving quite a lot of money if that is an option, $12,000 a year or more.
I guess really one thing would be to increase hours, because my work is very little hours, but I get paid $18 to $25 an hour for it. So that's kind of nice, but it's very
That's
little
great.
hours.
Yeah, that is nice though. I mean, if you're working an hourly job, definitely, if you can kind of negotiate maybe with your manager to see if you get time and a half.
It's clients based.
Oh, okay, clients based, got it. Yeah, it's fickle, it's a very fickle industry. Yeah.
That's why I thought I'd ask. And just to put it in perspective too, I have probably the cheapest apartment in my living city. My city. That's the crazy part.
Is there a how expensive is it to live in your city?
It's pretty cheap because I live in the Midwest, and
Okay.
I live in a college town too, so there's a lot of college places too and whatnot. We pay probably $5.65 a month total for water and rent. There's electricity and internet on top of that, but not much more for that. But it's basically literally $5.65 for two people, and we split that. So that's cheaper than most places in the country, I would even say.
Yeah, that is actually pretty cheap. So, I mean, it sounds like you're doing all the right things. You're obviously not living in an opulent lifestyle, which is really good. I think in this case,
Getting caviar.
Or it might be trying to find maybe another job or another client base, or see if you can get maybe a credential that would allow you to increase or charge more per hour. So I think right now I would be looking more on different options to increase your income through a different job, or increasing it because of an added credential or something like that.
Well, thank you, Fiona. I'm glad I asked.
Definitely, my pleasure.
Something we mentioned earlier about minimalism, and you were talking about your apartment space, and so kind of made me think about that, since we were talking about apartments again here. And I actually want to live in a tiny home. Like I really want to get like a high tech, ultra modern tiny home eventually at some point. Buy my own house that way. I don't want a big house. And so this kind of leads me to a question here: how did you purchase your first house at 23?
That is so cool, by the way, with the tiny home. That is
Right.
awesome. Like, so my house is not a tiny home, disclaimer. So how did I purchase my house at 23? That's a great question. What I ended up doing actually in college is I worked my entire way through college. I was lucky enough to have a really good academic scholarship. So thankfully, I didn't have to take on virtually any debt, which is good. However, I did still work my entire way through college because, there are still college books, et cetera, costs that aren't necessarily covered by scholarships. So first I paid that off and I made sure I emerged debt free, which I did. And then second, I graduated about 3 years early.
That's great.
Very early. And I knew I wanted to graduate early because I knew that would save me a lot of money in the end, right? I mean, most people, they go to college for 4 years, 5 years for undergraduate. In America, like 4 to 5 years. And I didn't because I knew that it would just take away time from my career. And it would take away money also from my living expenses because I wouldn't be earning any money in college. Or not, at least not as much as I could outside of college in the career force. So I went into work, and I was hired at a pretty reputable firm in financial planning. And I worked, I don't even know, 12, 15, 18-hour days, basically. Very, very, very long hours, very hard. And I made sure to get my credentials, right, my CFP, my master's degree, while I was working full-time and very early. And the fact that I had such an early start to my career enabled me to advance in my salary fairly fast, but that meant lots and lots of sacrifice. And I was lucky enough, I wasn't really looking for a house at the time, but I found this great house advertised through a real estate agent that I knew personally, and she was able to negotiate with a homeowner who needed to leave or whatever the case was. But the point is they agreed to lower the cost of the house by quite a bit. So I had some negotiating luck as well, or else I don't think I could have afforded the down payment. But I was able to negotiate, and I was able to, get this house, a beautiful house, not large at all, but it's perfect for the area that I'm living in. And it's an area that's actually growing as well, right? So we have I think a new museum that's going to be built here. So a lot of ways that the home value can increase. And I've actually seen my home value increase the last 2 years, 3 years, quite drastically. So
Nice.
it was, everything just kind of fell into place. And I don't think that people should force home ownership, right? Like you shouldn't force home ownership because I often hear that, having a home is the key to financial success. And I disagree with that because sometimes people just aren't made for homes, and that's perfectly fine. But for my case, I knew I loved the area I lived in. It wasn't necessarily expensive. It's warm, and I love warmth. So
That's
it's
good.
perfect for me. And I was at a point in my life where I didn't want to travel. I didn't want to live in different places. So I knew a house would be the right long-term commitment for me. And I had saved enough money because I made so many sacrifices. I, gave up a lot to save money for a down payment for a house that it just matched. Everything literally fell into place. And I'm happy with the decision I made. But I know others, they try to force buying a home and then they're very unhappy with it and they lose money because then they sell the house after 2 to 3 years. And that's not the way to approach this at all.
It is interesting too, and it seems like you had a pretty strong plan overall too with your life and finances there.
I did. And, I'm happy that I'm a very planned person, but at the same time, it's also important to not have everything planned
Yeah,
out.
be
So
spontaneous.
exactly. So and I know I lack that a little bit. I'm not extremely spontaneous, but and I get that feedback too, from my friends all the time. Like, come on, you have to be a little bit less structured and I love life. But I think the fact that I am where I am right now is because, like you said, I had a plan when I was in high school. I knew exactly that I wanted to advance in college as fast as possible, learn, do whatever I needed to do in college, graduate, get into my job, get my master's degree. So I had this plan, very structured plan, and it did get me to where I am today. But at the same time, I think I also lost out a little bit on the fun parts, in college or whatnot that I didn't necessarily get to experience. So it comes with a pro and a con.
Opportunity cost is a real kicker, but I also do think that you're still very young. You're still gonna have plenty of time to do a lot of fun things.
I hope so. Yeah.
How can we be disciplined and consistent with a financial plan then?
Okay, so here's what I ended up doing. I read, you remember those books that I said I read, like one book a day? One of those books, I forgot the name of it, but one of those books said one of the best and top strategies is to physically write down on a piece of paper what you want to do or what your goal is and be as specific as possible. So what I did after reading that, I took out a note card and I put pen to paper and I wrote down my financial goals. So I literally wrote down I wanted to have X amount of money in my bank account or in my investment accounts by this age, and this is what I was going to do to achieve it. And I did, one point was getting my CFP by age 20, etc., 22 or whatever it was, master's degree by age 23, right? So I went through and I put down these dots, these points, and I glued it to my bathroom mirror. So every morning, every night, I always saw those goals. And that's how I got there. Because every morning I was reminded what I was doing and what my purpose was. Because this is what I wanted to achieve. And I think similarly, that's how anyone can really accomplish their goals, right? Be it financial, be it business, be it personal, whatever it is. If you actually see these goals every day, if you're reminded every single day, chances are you're going to start doing whatever you have to do to make that an actual accomplishment.
Right. And it's one of those things too where it kind of brings up like the law of attraction too, but it's more about just getting things into your subconscious and getting things into the systems of your life, and it starts building habits from those systems.
That's exactly right. And I that was actually another book that I read during that time. the book, The Habit Book, right? How to create habits and how these deep-rooted habits actually form, and how you can force good habits to form, but you just have to be consistent. And I think that was one of the first steps that I took, and that really anyone can take, is, like you said, ingrain a goal in your subconscious, and that's where your conscious mind stems from. It's your subconscious. Yeah. So once that goal is ingrained in your subconscious, you'll start changing, bit by bit. It'll be very slight, but you will start changing your behavior to make that goal attainable.
Well, and it kind of brings me back to the 4 pillars too, because I often see spirituality, the spirit pillar, being the balance between the conscious mind and subconscious mind.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely right. Yep.
Is there a book you found to be massively influential on your journey?
I don't think there's just one book. I mean, there were so many books, like, again, as it relates to investing, I would say the behavior gap. As it relates to business, I'm sure you might have heard of this, What Harvard Business School Doesn't Teach You. That was a really good book. As it relates to mindset, the Millionaire Next Door, and as it relates to just being successful, there's this book called Winning by Jack Welch. I thought that was a really good book as well. There are so many books. As it relates to females in finance or females in business, there was one called Rich Girls Aren't Nice, or Nice Girls Aren't Rich, or I forgot the exact title of it, but it was really well written. It's just, there's so many books out there. You just have to go out there and find them.
That's interesting. I try to take links of those and put them in the description for people listening in if they want to check those out. Yeah, that's great. And it's one of those things too where the more you can read, the more smart you do become. It's interesting how most of the most successful people are prolific autodidacts.
That's right. Readers. Yeah, and when I actually found the title. It's called Nice Girls Don't Get Rich. It's by Lois P. Frankel, and she's a PhD, and that was a fantastic book because I was, really nice and, being quiet and polite and fair and not trying to, pipe up and speak your mind. Mm-hmm. Those are nice things, right? Those traits don't necessarily get you what you want in life. And this book really tries to train, the women who are a little bit more introverted, perhaps, like myself too, and they kind of help create, a mindset pattern to bring you out, of your shell and really try to, have you achieve your goals, whatever they are.
Yeah. And so, kind of going on the whole personality traits and this mindset, how can we innovate our mindset?
Ooh, that's a great question. How to innovate your mindset. I think one thing is for sure experiencing different cultures and experiencing just getting to know different people from different backgrounds. So I think that relates back to like the master's degree program that I took, right? I was able to be in such a great collaborative group with so many people from different and unique backgrounds that I think my original mindset, which was fairly rigid, right? I mean, it was a pretty rigid process from the CFP program to really go out of bounds and think more creatively. And that also goes back to the concept that financial planning is more of an art than a science. And I think that's also a reason why, for example, Harvard Business School really focuses on the case study method, where they try to bring in so many diverse perspectives and backgrounds to help kind of approach one specific problem, but from many unique backgrounds and experiences. And that's how I think one of the best ways is to, be innovative and change your mindset is by experiencing different people, different cultures, understanding where people come from, and then try to apply those different mindsets and mentalities to that specific problem you're trying to solve.
I love that. And that's perfect for PolyInnovator, I tell you what.
That's great. I'm glad to hear it.
What do you hope to inspire in people most?
I want to help people understand that anyone from any type of background can take their financial lives in their own hands and they can make of it what they will. And I'll give you an example. I was teaching a class, a high school class once, and one of the poorer parts of town. And these students, I think they were ninth graders, and in the beginning of the class, it's an hour class, I asked them, everyone raise your hand who thinks they're going to become a millionaire in their lives. No one raises their hand. And then we kind of go into class, and I go into what I want to tell them in my message. And really the message is, if you're 15 years old or 20 years old and you can save $5 a day or $10 a day, and you do that consistently for, 40 years, 50 years, chances are you are going to become a millionaire if you keep investing and you're going to keep being consistent. Right. And I showed them actually the math behind it. And I showed them, if you're 20 years old and you invest, let's say about $10 a day in the stock market, and you get that average 7% return, which is a historical average for the last 50 years, if you keep doing that every single day for the next 40 years, 45 years, you're going to be a millionaire. And I showed them the mathematics behind it. And at the end of the class, I asked them, so who thinks they're going to be a millionaire? And everyone raised their hand. Every single person raised their hand in that class. Nice. And I think it's a matter of just kind of debunking the mindset, right? It's again that mindset of, oh my gosh, I'm never going to attain millionaire status, because I think the media in modern society kind of puts that, taboo on being a millionaire. Like it's totally impossible and you need to give up so much to become a millionaire. And the fact of the matter is that's not true. Anyone can do it as long as you are consistent and you maintain a long-term mindset. And that's really the message that I want to, have your audience and your viewers hopefully take away and take it to heart.
I love that. And so that kind of leads me to this question here. Is that a topic, or is there a different particular topic that as a creator you wish to tackle head on?
I think there are two topics that I really wish to tackle. So like you said, the first one, definitely that anyone can be a millionaire. Anyone can be successful in their life financially as long as they are consistent and as long as they maintain that long-term mindset. And I think the second topic or second issue, if you will, that I want to tackle, and hopefully I'm being somewhat successful at it, is just helping to spread the word about financial literacy concepts. And I think that, again, so many people, they want to learn about money and they want to learn what the basics are about finance. But I think that, A, they don't know where to start. And B, I think that they are bombarded, right? I mean, all of us, we're bombarded with so much information every single day that it's really hard to filter out the noise. It's super hard to figure out, this source is accurate, this source is not accurate. And I think that that's a problem in today's modern day and age, that we just don't know who to trust anymore or what source to trust. And I hope that my website is able to at least break down some of the more complex financial matters for your audience and help debunk or decipher some of those fairly complex ideas and show that finance can actually be fun. And it is fun. It's not scary, because like finance, understanding it will actually help you accomplish your financial goals. And that's the fun of it.
Yeah, well, and it gets you kind of on the right track. It's just like any other skill, where the more you cultivate it, or even philosophy, a lot of philosophy of ancient times now becomes common sense in our more modern age, because, oh yeah, that makes sense. And same thing for a lot of financial concepts, like, oh, that makes sense. Why did I not think of that before?
That's exactly right. And it's just a matter of knowing where to place the first step. How do you start that first step?
What do you think can change about education for finance then?
I think one of the first things is probably starting education about finance in school. And I think I want to say there are 21 states currently that have a mandatory curriculum in personal finance. But it's just 21 states, right? It's less than 50% of states out there that actually teach financial literacy in school. And it would be really important, I think, for the well-being for our country and also just for ourselves and our families, is to have 50%, 100% of states out here to teach just the basic concepts of financial literacy. And, I don't know why more schools teach it. And I don't know why it's not mandatory. I know in my school it wasn't. And I think that's probably one of the major reasons why so many students are now in debt, again, just because they don't realize what a loan actually is. And student loans, they have a long-term effect, because it's causing millennials, for example, to postpone having families. It's causing millennials to postpone buying houses. It's causing millennials to be a lot more focused on their budgeting because they have to pay off student debt. So those things, they're going to trickle down in the economy in general. Like, the economy will feel the pain later down the road. Like, houses are probably the fact that houses cannot be purchased by that many millennials because they don't have a 20% down payment ready to go,
Yeah.
Like, it's just so hard nowadays. So I think the fact that, yes, we're, $1.56 trillion in student debt is one thing, but the other things that we don't necessarily realize, they will impact our economy, like later families, houses not being purchased, kids being had at a later age. It's all going to trickle down at some point.
Well, and I think the big point you made there too is that it should be enforced in school. I was one of the states where my personal finance class was required, but I don't remember anything from it. I don't think I learned anything from it. Most of the knowledge I had were from the other classes that I chose to take.
Yeah, it's, it comes down a lot to the teacher too. Like, how does the teacher kind of present that information? Because I know from my classes, like, for example, I had a calculus class. Like, I'm not really a calculus person, but the teacher that I had was so inspirational. Like, he loved calculus. You could just tell, like, he lived for calculus every day. And he actually made it fun. And I don't know how you make calculus fun, but he did. And that's what you need too. Like, you need teachers that are really passionate about A, helping the kids, and B, about the topic that they're teaching. And that's, I think, we're lacking that, unfortunately, quite often. And yeah, it's definitely a struggle, but definitely think that we need to have that in our school systems.
Definitely, that's a good point, Fiona. And we only have a few more questions before we wrap up here, but something I wanted to ask you too is that you noted yourself as a polyglot on your website. So what languages do you speak?
Yeah, so I speak English, German, Spanish, and a little bit of French.
Guten Tag, hola, and bonjour.
Ah, bonjour, comment allez-vous aujourd'hui?
Comme ci, comme ça.
Very good, très bien.
Ah.
That's
I
great.
speak more Spanish than I do French, but it is one of those things where I try to dabble in many different languages.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love learning languages. It's like, it also opens you up to, again, like that different culture, that different, those different people out there. So yeah, it's fantastic.
Well, and speaking of languages too, considering you have such a wide range of languages you speak, have you considered creating your content in other languages as well?
That is a really good point. So I have not yet done that. My focus is still really on the English language as it relates to content. But I think hopefully as I gain a little bit more traction and as the website expands and becomes a little bit bigger than it is now, I do actually want to do that because I think obviously there are a lot of Spanish speakers in this country, so hopefully I can add a little bit of value that way. But as well with German and possibly other languages, I think it will be very helpful. The only thing is obviously if a German person in Germany, not in America, reads some of the items on my blog, they always have to remember that the laws are pertaining to America, not to
Yeah.
Germany. So that's very important to note. But otherwise, absolutely, and I would love to do that. I think that would add a lot of value.
What is a trick to getting the habit of budgeting to stick?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think there are many different ways to kind of approach this, but something that has worked for me personally as well as my mentees is asking yourself, what do you want to achieve in your life? Like, what do let's say you're 85 years old and you're considering, what legacy do you want to leave behind once you're no longer here? And I know it's a really morbid thing to think about, and no one likes talking about death, but I think it is important in this case. And I ask them, what is it that you actually want to achieve in this life, right? We only have a limited amount of time. It's a limited resource. So whatever their answer is, if it is traveling the world or visiting all 7 continents or building my own house, whatever it is, I then ask them, so write down those goals and then write down the financial implication next to those goals. So if it's traveling around the world, is that backpacking and staying in hostels, or is it going, in luxury, going to the nice hotels? So I kind of want to figure out their lifestyle too.
Right.
So we put next to the goal, we actually put a number next to that goal. And then later on, we also figure out what are your short-term goals? Because most of the time, I ask them long-term goals first, and then we kind of figure out short-term goals. What do you want to do in the next, 3 to 5 years or so? And then they tell me, I want to save for a house, or I want to get a dog, or I want to buy a nice car, etc. And once again, we assign values to those goals. And once we kind of have a rough game plan of the short-term goals and the associated numerical value, and then the long-term goals along with an associated numerical value, then we start looking at their budget. And we kind of craft a budget. So we have different buckets, if you will. So we have a bucket that helps save money for their short-term goals. So for example, a down payment for a house. And we figure out mathematically, like, how many months do we need to save to fill up this bucket, if you will, like a savings account. It's called a house fund, for example, to make sure that you have a 20% down payment on a $200,000 house, for example. Or we create another bucket, and we specifically label those accounts. So we have like 5 different savings accounts that are labeled a house fund for a home purchase in 2024 for $30,000 or whatever it is, right? So we're as specific as possible for all of these goals. And then we start automating those investments or the payments to credit cards or payments to auto loans, you name it. So it's really about, again, writing down your short-term and your long-term goals, assigning a numeric value, and then figuring out how to modify your budget, so your current lifestyle, to really fit and make those goals happen. And it's not always an easy process. And I feel like, once you create your budget, chances are life is going to happen in one way or another, and you'll have to adjust your budget. But that's part of the process, right? It's the journey that counts, not so much the destination. So I really try to ingrain in, my mentees' minds that you have to be flexible in order to make those goals achievable.
Well, and I still keep thinking that systems come into play here, where you start building those systems, and really, if you can document it, like in Kanban boards or having different databases and having everything written down, you can just basically dump it out of your brain, so you no longer have to mentally worry about it and just focus on the goals in a more proactive way.
Definitely. That's actually something I encourage is holding a journal, a budgeting journal. And there's an exercise I go through, and it's basically my mentees, they literally have a pen and a paper, and every time for 3 months straight, they record exactly what they spend their money on, and it's to the cent. So if you spend 5 cents on a piece of chewing gum, they go ahead and they record that. And chances are, at the end of these 3 months, we tally up, how much they spend on chewing gum for the 3 months, or how much they spent on going out to eat in these 3 months. The numbers, they are so much more than what they typically expect. Like, I had a mentee, and she spent, I think, over $800 a month on just McDonald's. Like, it was just, she didn't even realize it. And, most of us don't, because, again, we prefer to be ignorant, right? Ignorance is bliss. But to have a budget, that's really going to be the first step to help you accomplish your goals.
Yeah. And bringing up Notion again, that whole life operating system that I mentioned earlier, it seems to be like that fits your kind of ethos there perfectly, where you can keep track of each of the goals and overall tasks you need to do to achieve those goals.
That's exactly right. Yes.
My final question here is, what is something you've never said or talked about that you secretly want to?
That's a good question. Although I did refer myself to be an introvert, I do typically, I typically say everything I think or everything that is on my mind. Like, I wear my heart on my sleeve. So I'm not really too resistant to, talk about things that I want to hold back. Like, I typically don't hold back, much to the chagrin of my husband.
Yeah.
He's like, why do you talk so much? Can't you just be quiet? But I think one of the things I love exploring, and I would love to have more time to explore, is really the concept between an introvert versus an extrovert, and how and why some extroverts typically make, or ambiverts even, make a more charismatic or possibly more effective leader in specific business industries. And actually, I'm super fascinated about that. I read this book, again, on my 1 book a day diet, I guess. It's called Quiet by Susan Cain. Okay. And it's a really, really good book. And it kind of talks about the philosophy of introverts and why introverts are actually, thought leaders, if you will. And I think the byline in the book is why introverts are the power of introverts in a world that can't stop talking. That's the byline. And I think it's fascinating because the book really starts talking about and dissecting the mindset and the ways that introverts recharge their batteries versus extroverts. Mm-hmm. And it kind of talks about how, extroverts are cherished in certain cultures while introverts are cherished in other cultures, and how ambiverts really combine the two personalities together to possibly be, different leaders that motivate their employees in different ways and manners. And I'm just fascinated by the topic of leadership in general, and how some leaders, they literally have so much energy and you don't know how they get it, versus other leaders, they're really quiet, they're very reserved, but they're still fantastic and incredible leaders. So, to answer your question, I personally don't really hold things back, but if I could spend more time talking about something and really learning about something, it would be about the introvert versus extrovert person, the personality, and how each type of personality can, be a great leader in and of itself.
Yeah, I don't think there is a perfect kind of personality for leadership per se. I think anyone can be if you learn the skills for it, but there is that whole mindset of introverts kind of being not as good leaders. But there's actually been a ton of famous people. I think even like Jeff Bezos, I think, is an introvert who's a great leader. And I'm getting certainly ambivert advice from you. I'm an ambivert myself, and so that's interesting.
Yeah, I really love learning about it, because I took a leadership class in college, and the professor kind of stated, to be a good leader, you have to be an extrovert. And that was kind of the message I got from that class. And I don't know if it was just me or if that was, the entire class, but that's when I started questioning, the authority, if you will. And is that necessarily right? Is that really true, that to be the best and most effective leader, you have to be an extrovert, you have to be charismatic? And, I think to some certain degree that is right. But on the other hand, you don't necessarily have to be so charismatic.
Let's also mention that charisma and extroversion are mutually exclusive. They do often are associated together. Extroverts are usually charismatic because they're able to be socialized. Usually it's just because they have more social experience with people, I would say.
That is very true. And I think that, that distinction isn't necessarily made clear.
Maybe there's some content you and I need to make either
Yeah.
together or separate to do.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. Where can people find you online?
Sure. So obviously, one of the places I would start is themillennialmoneywoman.com. It's my blog, personal financial literacy platform. I try to post about 3 blog posts a week, and there's a contact me section right there, and you can contact me via email, themillennialmoneywoman@gmail.com, or if you prefer to use Twitter, my handle is @the_MMW. And if you prefer Pinterest, you can simply search me up by The Millennial Money Woman. And I'm always happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. Well, we met on matchmaker.fm too for podcasters and in this case polycasters. So it's good to be
That's
on
right.
there too. Yeah.
That's very right.
I'll make sure I have links in the description for you anyways too so people can find you. What is the call to action for the audience today then?
The big call to action here is if you want it bad enough, if you want to make if you want to take control of your financial future, then you can do it. And you can start today. And it's really all about being consistent and having that long-term mindset. So I think it's so important. If you want to make something happen in your life, start today. Today is the best day to do it.
Love that. Thank you, Fiona, for your time.
Thank you so much, Dustin, for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's a lot of fun. This is one of the longer episodes I've had too. That's gonna be interesting editing, but at least it's only audio, so that'll make it easier for us. Once again, this is Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator, and this was the Millennial Money Woman on the Polymath podcast.